Welcome to the Paul Lovette Show, the show where truth meets bold patriotism. I am your host, Paul Lovette, a proud, unapologetic Black American conservative. Today's episode is titled Letitia James, Mortgage, Insurance Fraud, and Karma is a Bee. Today's episode is the conclusion of our two-part series discussing the criminal referral to the Department of Justice by the Director of the Federal Housing and Finance Agency, Director William Pulte, regarding alleged pattern and practice of mortgage fraud by the New York State Attorney General Letitia James, spanning a period from 1983 to present. Without further ado, let's dive into James's attorney, Abby Lowell's response letter and critically think it through. Now we're going to look at her attorney, Abby Lowell, his response to the criminal referral to Attorney General Pam Bondi. And I consider it a useless 33-page document. The letter only serves to illustrate Letitia James's pattern of initiating loan documents with faulty and incorrect or misleading information to gain financial benefits. And then she follows it up with correspondences or irrelevant documents in relation to the original loan, trying to cover up what she's done. So let's step forward here and take a look at what Mr. Lowell opened his letter with. I represent New York State Attorney General Letitia James and have reviewed U.S. Federal Housing Director William Pulte's April 14, 2025 letter titled Criminal Referral. I write to address the latest acts of improper political retribution, this time directed at Ms. James, publicly instigated and endorsed by President Trump. The stunning hypocrisy of President Trump's complaint that the Justice Department had been politicized and weaponized against him is laid bare as he and others in his administration are now asking you to undertake the very same practice. This so-called criminal referral, which recycles long disproven allegations and is based on media reports, lacks any credible foundation. Having one of the president's aides shout to reporters that she's guilty of multiple significant serial criminal violations is no substitute for the facts. So where do we begin here? This is amazing because in one sense he is acknowledging the fact that the criminal justice system was weaponized, as we all know, against President Trump. Just think of the 14 counts he was convicted on. So I'll say that when your response includes improper political retribution, it sets a tone and appeal for the entire letter to be an emotional response. So he's trying to evoke a emotional political response that he hopes is going to just whitewash over the actual loan documents, the actual black and white, what appears to be clear proof that she is guilty of what is being alleged. Next, we move on to Abby Lowell's defense of Letitia James and his many excuses for why she did what she did. They are future dated documents that do nothing to change the facts of the original falsified documents to gain favorable mortgage rates. The offer documents by Lowell prove only that she consistently tries to cover up her original sins of mortgage fraud. So on our slide here, he talks about political retribution and weaponization, which is rather ironic considering these are the two tools she used against President Trump. next was baseless allegations. He claims that Director Pulte's comments are baseless. Well, we know otherwise. So he hits comments on each property. So first he starts with the Sterling property in Norfolk, Virginia. And he highlights in August 2023, James helps her niece with down payment for this home. Also, he states that the loan only requires one individual to live at the property. We know that's not right. And he states that 2 weeks prior, James said that she would not reside there. And he also mentions the erroneous POA, or power of attorney. And then next, at the Lafayette property in Brooklyn, New York, he states that Miss James has lived there since 2001, and it has functioned as a 4-unit dwelling. And he also asserts a bunch of irrelevant information regarding living arrangements, trying to evoke sympathy that just doesn't have a place in this discussion. And he also, importantly, he belittles the 24-year-old certificate of occupancy. And we'll discuss more about that. And then finally, he does mention the Queens property, which is a property purchased by Letitia James and her father. It's presented as him purchasing a property. The problem here is he uses her name with her permission, but he also lists him and her as spouses. Kind of gross, considering this is a father. So a lot to unpack there. So I'm going to step back. So for the Norfolk, Virginia property, the 604 Sterling Street, if you wanted to discredit Director Pulte's claim, you would present, in my opinion, 1, the type of loan, primary residence or not. 2, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loan requirements that does not or waives the requirement that James and her niece, Shamish Thompson Hairston, reside at the home as their primary residence. And 3, explain why the power of attorney was needed if James was just helping her niece with a down payment. Now, you and I, when we get a mortgage, we have to explain where all the money is being utilized for the loans comes from. If there's like a recent inflow of money, the bank wants to know that person is either going to have to be on the mortgage, or you're not going to be allowed to use that money to make the requirements of the loan. And with the Brooklyn, New York home, this is our 296 Lafayette. Lowell's open paragraph regarding this property is completely irrelevant with respect to the certificate of occupancy. Just because A.G. Jones used it only as a 4-unit dwelling instead of the 5 units outlined in the certificate of occupancy, it does not change the validity of and her responsibility with respect to the certificate of occupancy. Further, Lowell he shamefully attempts to infer that the certificate of occupancy is not a valid document because it is 24 years old. Does that mean Lowell thinks that the original loan documents are invalid since they are also 24 years old? I really hope not. If he does, I think I want half of his salary. And then Lowell makes the case regarding New York City records, listing the Brooklyn property, the Lafayette property, as a 4-unit dwelling, including the New York Department of Finance listing it as a C3-4 families for tax purposes. My first thought here is that with AG Attorney General James, her pattern over the years of asserting in filings that the property is a 4-unit dwelling, the city's records have just mutated over the years to conform to what James is asserting in her filings. So, tell a lie long enough and it becomes truth, or at least she hopes it becomes truth. Also, explain to me why the tax documents he presented in his rebuttal are only from 2020 to present. There seems like a lack of transparency here. Is there some information prior to that year that damns her in her actions? And then further still, he still does not state why the certificate of occupancy is invalid beyond it being 24 years old. And he wants to also imply that the August 23rd, 2011 Affordable Modification Program application document supersedes this certificate of occupancy. And this is rather laughable when you know the importance of the certificate of occupancy. And we're going to touch on that more in a little bit. And then finally, he's talking about the Queen's property that her father purchased. I was not going to, in fact, cover it, but I chose to include it because it further illustrates her pattern of submitting financial documents and getting a financial benefit from them, and follow on excuse of why the original document was made in error. So what happened here was Letitia's father wanted to buy a home, and he asked her if he could include her name on the application. And that very fact makes her a co-borrower, does it not? So he fills out this document, but he also lists her as his wife, which is, kind of creepy there. But still, why did he do that? He did that so that they would get a more favorable mortgage rate. And so this just right back to Letitia James, a borrower, getting the benefit of a mortgage loan based on false and incorrect information. And I can't help but ask the question of, when her father died, who received the house in the will? Who did it pass to? That would be an interesting question to know also. Okay, so a lot has been said about the certificate of occupancy. So let's take a look at this document and its importance. So the certificate of occupancy in New York is a critically important document. It is a legal document issued by the Department of Buildings that specifies a building's permitted use and occupancy type. And in further research from the Gonkar Real Estate, 115 Central Park West website, it states the following regarding the certificate of occupancy. There is a whole lot of power in this little piece of paper, so much so that it has the clout to win legal cases in negotiations, put the kibosh on your mortgage, and more. So it is a hugely important document that she has, despite her and her attorney stating that it's just some 24-year-old document. Why haven't you got it corrected if it truly was a document in error? The reason you haven't corrected it because it is a true and factual document issued by the Department of Buildings. So you're going to have to answer for that. And further, the penalties behind this document, civil penalties, fines for the COO, the certificate of occupancy violations, often starts in the hundreds of dollars and can run into the thousands, depending on the nature and severity of infractions. Enforcement actions can come from violating the document. The Department of Buildings and the New York City Housing Preservation and Development may issue notices of violations. leading to court action, increased fees, and in some cases, criminal charges for egregious and repeated offenses. Then restrictions on landlord rights for violation. So owners who lack a valid certificate of occupancy may be unable to collect rent through eviction or summary proceedings until compliance is achieved. And emergency repairs and inspections. The city may impose additional fees, conduct emergency repairs at the owner's expense, or require post-violation inspections and with associated costs. So it is a very important document that you must be in compliance with. I want to thank those of you that have stuck with me this far, and I want to encourage you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It will allow our content to be noticed by the algorithm, and you'll get notified when we upload new content. So without further ado, let's bring this home. Our conclusions and our verdict. Count 1 is the 604 Sterling Street, Norfolk, Virginia property. Here, the Attorney General James gave her niece a power of attorney, making it her primary residence. The purpose of this is for the loan that was closed on August 30th and August 31st. And it creates a double whammy of evidence against James in that she took office as Attorney General on 1 January 2019. And then on July 15th, 2024, there was a building permit for her 296 Lafayette, Brooklyn property. And what the point here is that the loan was in August of 2003. This building permit was less than a year, 11 months in July, showing that it was her residence and that it was still occupied. So she's caught with her pants down, if you will. So the only way we see of avoiding this allegation of fraud, Letitia James and Abby Lowell would have to show that James was not included as a borrower for this mortgage. But since Lowell acknowledges that James helped her niece with the down payment, this would presumably require her to be a co-borrower for the mortgage. So it is doubtful that this bold-faced mortgage fraud can be swept under the rug. Now moving on to count 2. This is the 296 Lafayette Avenue in Brooklyn, New York property. This has the conflict with the certificate of occupancy. The certificate of occupancy was issued on January 26, 2001 by the New York City Department of Buildings. And as we've said before, it is the gospel of a building's type and purpose for occupancy. So a mere 20 days later, she took out this mortgage for the property, and the last 2 pages is the 124 family dwelling rider to the mortgage. So that is a glaring fraud there. And the reason it's significant is 1 to 4, you get a residential, conforming loan, as opposed to the 5 unit is going to be considered a commercial property, and you're going to have to face greater down payments, higher mortgage rate. So this is the financial gain once again she's getting. But as is her MO, her and Lowell says, oh, it was an error, it was an accident. So interestingly, as I look at this and I'm thinking about her MO of the original document being in error after she's gotten the benefit, the interesting thing here is the original document is the certificate of occupancy, and she wants to insist that it is wrong and insist that her usage is the source document that validates her mortgage for this property, which is quite dubious at best. it is because she believes, when in the face of black and white, it is not what she says it is. Clearly a 5-unit document. And let me remind you of the quote from the Gonkar real estate website. There is a whole lot of power in this little document. So much so that it has the clout to win legal cases in negotiations and put the kibosh on your mortgage and a lot more. This is how powerful that certificate of occupancy is. And I think Lowell knows this, but he's defending an indefensible case. And if he and James are asserting that the certificate of occupancy is in error, why in 24 years have they not corrected it? And even still, it cannot change the fact that January 26, 2001, the certificate of occupancy was issued as a 5-unit dwelling, and on a mere 20 days later, she pulled a mortgage on February 14th, stating that it was a 1 to 4 person dwelling. So she cannot get around it. It is exposed to the light of day, and it needs to be pursued. Our verdict: we, the people, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, New York Attorney General Letitia James, guilty as sin. We have to understand that James is not just some Joe Smo off the street. She has been licensed to practice law since 1989. She has been the New York Attorney General since 1 January 2019. She's not going to be able to play dumb or blame her mortgage agents, as she had a duty to ensure the correctness of the information regarding her that was submitted in the documents. It appears she directed and, at the very least, allegedly provided false information and signed documents with false information, resulting in her personal financial gain in violation of mortgage lending rules and relevant federal and state laws. So remember, Tisha's MO: submitting a document with false information for a personal gain for these mortgage rates, and following up with emails and documents to try and justify or smooth over the original incorrect documents. So if you're intellectually honest, it should be obvious for all to see. The Department of Justice should pursue this case with the same vigor as Attorney General James' a wanton attack on President Trump. The only difference being that James conspired with a questionably corrupt judge to railroad the president into a 14-count conviction based on a victimless mortgage and false documents case. So remember, the banks all testified that the president paid back all of his loans with interest. The complaint originated with Letitia James and not with the banks, who would have been the injured party. For the case against Letitia James, we have all the documents to confirm the corruption. Much of them I have shown you here, and you can find it widely around the net. So James's shadows of darkness has been exposed to the light of truth, and she has been found draped in shame. The Empress has no clothes and must now stand in her own shame. Karma is a real bee, and those that live in glass houses should never cast.
Donald Trump and the other defendants have committed persistent and repeated fraud. Last week, we proved that in our motion for summary judgment. Today, we will prove our other claims. My message is simple. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much money you think you may have, no one is above the law. And it is my responsibility and my duty and my job to enforce it. The law is both powerful and fragile, and today in court, we will prove our case. I thank you all for being here, and again, justice will prevail. Thank you.
James, by her very own words, compels the FBI and the Department of Justice to uphold their responsibility and duty to enforce the law. We also demand and expect that justice will prevail because we believe in equal treatment under the law and that no one is above the law. So thank you for joining our discussion. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification button to stay up to date on our content. This helps us get noticed by the algorithm, and until next time, God bless America.